Looking back, you didn't expect it. You certainly didn't expect it.
I was 27 years old, had never fished a fishing tournament in my life.
We were secretly hoping, but I don't think any of us really and truly expected it.
If we're going to go out there and compete, we're going to play to win. We're not going out there to be cannon fodder.
It was a con job. A lot of it was a con job. It played to some of these guys' advantage.
Now in its 7th year, the Bassmaster Classic was beginning to experience growing pains. From its inception, the location of the Classic had always been kept a secret. However, in 1977, BASS had outgrown the novelty of the Mystery Classic.
When they pull away the Mystery Lake, it's just another tournament competing for more money.
This being the first year of not having this, a secret lake kind of took away from it.
It lost a little of its attraction as far as a news event because it was always a lot of fun, but at the same time, it had probably run its course.
Bob Cobb and Ray claimed they needed to change it because a lot of news organizations wouldn't let somebody just go off on a trip when they didn't know where they were going.
I think that we had milked the PR end of it for all we could get. And we needed to start telling people where we're going and start talking about it.
The Classic had become a popular sporting event, and I wanted to give people an opportunity to plan their vacation and come and be involved in it.
It was easy to see that in those days the Classic was already growing, and people just would not commit to a week of some mystery in some place. And as the Classic grew, it became harder and harder to coordinate.
Certainly easier for us. Our crowd just went up through the roof. When we announced this months ahead that we were going to a certain place where the crowds would book hotel rooms and started building a big followings.
People were prepared for us. There were signs all over the place. Welcome, Bassmaster Classic. You talk to people in stores, oh, we couldn't wait till you got here.
The 1977 Classic was announced in advance, but only a week in advance. You really didn't have a whole lot of time to think about it.
Even though BASS announced the Classic location ahead of time, many of the competitors were not thrilled with their final destination.
Back in the early days of BASS, the first tournament was always in Florida. I'd never go.
There's a lot of guys that fish the tournament circuit that never liked Florida fishing. I mean, Florida fishing is good, but it's different.
I hated Toho. I hated Florida. I just despised fishing in Florida.
And I was thrilled to death to go to Lake Toho because of its reputation for big fish.
I don't have any objection to it. It's just a bowl out there. It has no contour. And that's probably the reason why they don't like Toho that much.
Fishing in a cabbage patch is what I called it. It was grass and just, I never could figure out why they were by this piece of grass and not by that piece of grass.
It's mentally very stimulating because you got all these different types of vegetation and when you see it, you think, gosh, there's fish everywhere. Of course, just like anything, there's not. And you got to figure out the patterns within the patterns. What type of grass are they using? Are they in the boat trails or in the edges? Or are they back in the thick stuff? Are they in the canopy stuff? You know, so it's a lot more complex than it looks like in the beginning.
Well, if you wanted to fish weeds, you had them all a variety of all kinds, and very little deep water.
I had never fished a lake in my life that was so shallow. I mean, I could run, you know, for miles, and the depth finder might vary 1 foot or 2 foot, you know, one way or the other, you know, which was completely different than anything I'd ever fished before.
I've always just said it was a big fish bowl. I mean, it's round, it's got a lock on one end that you can get out of there and go somewhere else, but other than that, it's just a big old flat lake. It's got weeds all the way around it and very few docks and not much structure change.
We need the grass. We've got to have the grass in here for cover. Otherwise, it wouldn't be any fish. If it was just a punch bowl type lake, we wouldn't have any fish in here. So we've got to have the grass. But we've got so much grass here, we just don't know which grass bed to fish.
True to form, in late October, this particular Classic got hit by cold fronts early on, and fishing got very, very tough.
The Florida strain It seems to be a little more finicky, much more susceptible to any colder weather conditions, any fronts.
They're a moody fish anyway. The subtropical strain, like the Florida bass, are highly, highly effective with barometric pressure changes.
The fish being warm water fish and they don't see a lot of cold water, they do react probably as harshly to cold fronts and things as any fish that I've ever fished. And that was exactly what happened to us during the 77 Classic.
Up next on Bassmaster Classic Yearbook.
We'd see each other's picture in the fishing newspaper every week, you know, big stringers of fish.
He kept telling me, he said, my gosh, he said, man, you catch fish better than anybody I've ever seen.
Larry's blue jeans were all frayed around the house. and he fished in sandals, and he needed a haircut. And a lot of the things that indicated that it wasn't a good idea to try to invest too heavily in bass turtles.
To remain successful in competitive bass fishing, you have to maintain a high level of desire. 1971 Bassmaster Classic winner Bobby Murray walked away from the tournament trail at the height of his career. Many say he had lost the desire, even though he was still considered one of the best.
Bobby was a good enough fisherman. He could have done well in future tournaments had he stayed with it, but perhaps he just lost his desire.
You've got to want it. You know, and at the time when I backed out of the events, I really wanted to see if I could make it in the sales business of the industry.
I know he was very popular on the speaking circuit. He also was a good representative for the tackle companies that he represented.
He didn't want to travel anymore. He didn't want to follow the tournament tour. He wanted to sell fishing tackle. But he just didn't have the desire to fish tournaments anymore, is the way he put it to me.
It's all based on passion, desire, and mental effort.
If you get complacent and you don't have that expectation and you lose that fire in your belly and you're not chasing a dream, you're not going to do very good.
Even if you stayed on tour for those 2 years, it would actually do you much more harm because it would start to affect your confidence.
After just 2 short years, Bobby was back on the circuit and had qualified for the 77 Classic. He was still a sales rep. However, his latest employer had given him a new directive and the desire to compete again.
At that time, he was working for a hydrosport boat company and vice president of sales. Joe Reeves said, I want you to make sure you're at each and every event. So, you know, I kind of got the fire back in my belly. I said, if we're going to go out there and compete, we're going to play to win. We're not going out there to be cannon fodder. If we're going to go out there, we're going to go out there to do one thing, and we're going to win. Fishing is a learned skill. It's like riding a bike. You don't learn it. It wasn't like I wasn't fishing. I was still fishing all the time. I just had other priorities that I was trying to get pulled together.
You don't lose any of your fishing ability. What he had learned growing up as a fisherman, he applied that in the early days and did well. He backed away from it for a year or two, but he came back with it.
If he needed a couple days or a couple of years off and then came back with the correct mental philosophy, it is really literally a 5-minute process to get all your other techniques back.
As Bobby Murray was making his comeback, a little-known guide from Arkansas was emerging onto the scene. Deemed one of the Hemphill gang, Larry Nixon would soon put his own mark on the fishing world.
Yeah, he's part of the Hemphill gang. He's on the other side of the river. No, Larry is actually a transplant from Arkansas, but he just got down in there and started guiding out of Hemphill and got him married into the family there.
Well, that story's kind of funny. You know, I grew up in central Arkansas, and I went to high school with a couple of boys that were really good fishermen. They run off and left me when I was a senior in high school, moved to Toledo Bend. So I went to college a couple years, and I went down and visited them a time or two, and finally in '72, I told Daddy, I said, man, I'm going broke trying to go to college. I'm borrowing all this money, and I don't know what I want to be. I said, can I borrow your boat for about 3 months? Well, 3 months later, I was booked for 100 days in a row, you know, and I said, well, I'm just going to stay. I stayed down there 17 years.
Tommy Martin, his best friend, was really leaning on him to get more involved in tournament fishing because he knew what a great fisherman Larry was.
He was a guide here on Toledo. I guided down on the south end, he guided up at the bridge, and we knew of each other. We'd see each other's picture in the fishing newspaper every week, you know, big stringers of fish. We fished every day, every day.
He kept telling me, he said, my gosh, he said, man, you catch fish better than anybody I've ever seen. He said, you're crazy. He said, you need to start fishing these bass tournaments.
I felt like that he had a real good chance of exceeding at tournament fishing, so I encouraged him to get involved in them.
So in '77, I saved up every nickel I could save and fished my first BASS in January of '77. I was 27 years old and had never fished a fishing tournament in my life. And so I went down there to Florida, and in fact, I had a Dodge car, and like I pulled it apart, pulling my bass boat all the way to Florida. And I won enough money at the St. Johns River to go to, I think it was Lake Gaston was the March tournament. The February tournament actually was on Toledo Bend. And I'd put a pencil to it, and there was a 2-week off-limit period, and I said, I can't do that. I'll lose my butt if I miss all them guide days.
Larry was literally living from tournament to tournament on his winnings. Beyond that, he qualified for the Classic, which shows you that he had the skill to do it.
Larry Nixon of Texas. He does have 2 bass, as he reported. Weight, 4 pounds even.
And that was the very first year they paid $10,000 for the second place man, and that got me even, because at that point in time I was behind from what I would have made had I stayed home and guided.
Without that money, I doubt very seriously if his career could have continued. I think that $10,000 was part of seed money that let Larry Nixon become the fisherman that he did.
You know that's a no-no, but it still affects you mentally.
So you didn't know if somebody's telling the truth or not?
It was a con job. A lot of it was a con job. They played to some of these guys that
BASS was continually searching for a way to entertain the fans on shore. 1977 was the second year BASS used CB radios to monitor on-the-water action. The reports they received didn't always add up.
Everybody had walkie-talkies, and the good part was they wouldn't reach a long ways, and sometimes you got reports and sometimes you didn't.
What they were trying to do is entertain the public during the day, so they set up a big grandstand and a big scoreboard, and we drew numbers every day so nobody would know who it was.
I think we all knew each other's boat number. If you wanted to know somebody's boat number, it wasn't hidden from you.
every time you caught a fish, you had to come in, whether it was a 13-incher, 12-incher, 10-incher, 24-incher.
And they'd make the press angler CB radio back. This is number 2. My angler has 1 bass, looks like it weighs 2 pounds.
Boat 6 has got 10 pounds of fish. Our boat 5's got 4 pounds of fish. And then boat 6 started calling in saying boat 5's got 12 pounds of fish. So you didn't know if somebody's telling the truth or not.
It was a con job. A lot of it was a con job. They played to some of these guys' advantage to let people think that this is where they're fishing, and they weren't.
It got to the point where none of us wanted to hear the reports because we didn't know whether it was the truth or not.
Anglers don't want to know what the other guy's doing. Most of us don't, because it can become a very powerful distraction.
You know that's a no-no, but it still affects you mentally.
You don't want anybody to know what you're doing now because everybody's listening in.
There were times a couple of times when we had fish early, and we didn't call them in till like 10 after 2. So it really never got the full truth.
Had everybody been using the radios and had everybody been truthful, it would have been very similar to what they're doing today, with the exception they wouldn't have had the TV cameras.
It was just one of them Ray Scott deals, to have fun with. Give them a walkie-talkie and let them listen to each other.
Day 3 found defending Classic champion Rick Clunn in the lead by a slim margin over newcomer Larry Nixon. But Rick's fish and luck were beginning to play out.
Rick was fishing a big, long, grassy point there on the lake, and besides the buzzbait that he was using, he was also fishing a Johnson spoon, and he had painted it black. The bite was just extremely difficult. Rick only had 2 bites all day long.
It's one thing to be catching fish, and then having to mentally deal with the energy of the Classic and the pressure of the Classic. But it's altogether a different thing that last day, to be knowing that you're about to blow it, and because you're not catching fish.
The cold weather just made it one of these exercises in cast.
I have no excuses. We threw them our best pitch. They beat us to our knees. Bo said tomorrow's going to be a tougher day than today. If it is, we might as well sleep in on them.
The catches fell off significantly, but that shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that's ever bass fish with a cold front.
You got one fish in the boat. There's probably 3 or 4 guys that they just get in a little flurry and catch 2 or 3 fish. You can't beat them. It was the second event that we had CB radios, and I kept getting reports that last day that Bobby Murray was really catching them.
A school of fish came up and stayed up, and along came Bobby Murray. Murray started catching them, and I remember sitting there watching him, just thinking, here comes win number 2 for Murray.
I hadn't had a good event, and we were trying to qualify for the Bass Champs. They were going to take the top 10 onto the Bass Champs. And the third day, I got back in a little old area, and I saw some shad jump and flip, and a bass took one off the top, and boom. I was on them. There was a school of bass working through that grass, about 6 or 7 feet of water.
Fishing heavy grass in a lake known for 10-pounders, and out pops Murray with a little 6-pound outfit and a small plastic grub. And I just started nailing these fish.
And in 15 minutes, I'd caught like 12 or 15 keepers right there, and caught the biggest string of the tournament right there in an hour and a half, and it was over.
And he's the only one that day. And so he was the one I was really sweating that final day to a great degree.
Up next on Bassmaster Classic Yearbook.
Then he sets a hook on this fish, and he pulls the fish out of the grass, and it's just a matter of reeling it in. And the line just parted right below the rod tip.
The last day coming in with one fish, I thought I'd lost the tournament.
Late on the last day, leader Rick Clunn had only one small keeper in the boat. Bobby Murray was reporting a large limit, and Larry Nixon had caught 4 bass. However, despite Larry's last-minute run at the lead, he might have lost the Classic on his first cast that morning.
On the last day of the Classic, I was with Larry, and fishing was really kind of tough. But Larry had figured out there was a little cut that went through the grass, and these bass were in the grass, and they would come out chasing shad, and he'd see a little swirl, and he'd take a little jerk bait, and he'd throw it in there when those fish would swirl, and he'd catch them.
I went out early in the morning and was fishing topwater, just taking a rogue and throwing it up in the mouth of these little boat cuts that run through the grass, because that's your only structure. I mean, it's not like you got drop-offs to fish. You fish actual trails through the weeds. And these fish were schooling there, and every morning, boy, if I could get there real quick, I could catch me 3 or 4 quick.
May have been the first fish of the day, and he saw a swirl, and he threw in there, and he's got a medium to light action rod, and he sets a hook on this fish, and he pulls the fish out of the grass, and it's just a matter of reeling it in, and the line just parted right below the rod tip.
When I pulled on the fish and set the hook, my line broke, and it's laying on the water, and I'm looking at it, and I'm trolling as hard as I can get, because I was going to catch it, whale rope it in, and my line just disappeared, and then the fish jumps out of the water, and he's 4-pounder.
Wasn't any reason for the line to break. The fish wasn't putting any pressure on it, no nothing. And it just had a little nick in it or something, and that cost him the Classic.
The last day coming in with one fish, I thought I'd lost the tournament. By then, I'd even heard Larry had 2, and I really thought, well, if he just has one good one in there, he's going to beat me. And then again, I didn't know what Bobby had. So there was a couple of guys that I really felt like, you know, even after I'd heard through the rumor mill who had what and who had, they still, I thought, had me beat. And then all of a sudden, everybody that you thought could catch you starts, you know, not weighing anything in, and then you're down to one guy left that can beat you. I mean, the pressure is by far worse than it was in '76 when I pretty much had blown everybody away. You know, the pressure in that one was probably the hardest on me as far as the final weigh-in of any classic I've ever won.
Rick doesn't have much, only one small fish. If it's less than a pound, it's all over.
Now let's remember, 2 pounds, 11 ounces, and the champion.
Rick Clunn, of course, did that, we call it belly to belly, back to back. He blew them all away. Just tells me he's got it together, still has it together.
I think we were surprised that, and a little shocked that Clunn could win it, and by then I think you're starting to say, hey, this guy's really for real.
Looking back, you didn't expect it. You certainly didn't expect it. But it was a long shot, so to speak.
There was a little bit of luck in the second one, but not enough to give luck all the credit.
There's not a lot you could say about the fishing. I mean, my fishing, it was one of those gift tournaments, you might say, which I don't believe in and don't really even acknowledge most of the time, but it's one of those tournaments you don't feel like you should have won, but you did.
We were secretly hoping for a back-to-back win, not only for him personally, but again, realizing what this could do for the sport, but I don't think any of us really and truly expected it.
I think Ricky did something tremendous. I really do. And that speaks a lot for his fishing ability. But Ricky could have won the next 2 or 3 in a row. Why not? He's that good a fisherman.
I was in the driver's seat. I'd prepared my whole career to fish the Bassmasters Classic. I knew the format. I knew what it was going to take to win it. And I just didn't think anybody could beat me in it. You know, once I got that first one under my belt.
I knew Rick's ability was good enough to win 2 classics in a row, and when you're fishing good and you got that mind frame, you're going good, you know, you just catch them everywhere you go, and that was Ricky's classic.
You got to have some luck in these tournaments, but most of Rick's luck was not luck, and you know, he proved that.
First morning of the tournament, it was so foggy you couldn't see the guy in the back of the boat. Of course, back then they didn't hold you for nothing. You went.
They took off on the very first morning in a fog, and Rick got lost.
And I meant to run through Toho, go through the lock, and go through into Kissimmee. I couldn't find the lock. So I finally, out of frustration, just said, well, I'm just going to stop and waste some time. I'm going to stop and start fishing.
Pulled right into an area and started fishing. Didn't know where he was, quite where he was. He knew about where he was, I understand.
And he picked up a lure called a Floyd's Buzzer, which was an inline buzzbait. I had never seen one, and no one else was using one. But nonetheless, Rick got lost in the fog, thought he was at his spot.
And picked up a buzzbait and had to make 3 casts off 7-pounder on the buzzbait.
He chose the right lure to throw at the right time and caught some big fish early again.
This is how the Clunn legend gathered another step. To stop in a fog, lost, second cast, new bait that none of us have seen, and he nails a 7-pounder. Those are the things that built Rick's career.
This has been a presentation of ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports.